The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production, and you're going to love it.
Learning new details today about a deadly protest outside the Israeli embassy in Washington. Authorities identified Aaron Bushnell as the person who, on Sunday, set himself on fire. The 25-year-old was an active duty member of the U.S. Air Force. CNN's Gabe Cohen joins us now with the details. And Gabe, this is something that he did in protest.
Yeah, that's correct. And we're learning much more about this 25-year-old active duty airman, Aaron Bushnell, as you mentioned. He's from San Antonio, Texas, and he live streamed his actions on Sunday in broad daylight on the streets of D.C. outside the Israeli embassy. We are not going to show that video. It is extremely graphic and disturbing. I have watched the video. I can tell you at the beginning, at the start of it, you can see Bushnell walking up to the embassy on the street in his military fatigues. He's speaking calmly to the camera. I want to read a portion of what he says. He said, quote, "I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I am about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it is not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." He then goes on to pour some sort of accelerant, it looks like, on his head out of a water bottle he was carrying. And then he lights himself on fire, Boris. And as the flames engulf him, you can hear him yelling, free Palestine," again and again, until finally he collapses. And that is when officers, you can see them race in, one of them with a fire extinguisher in their hands, trying to put out the flames. But it takes time. And as we have learned, Bushnell died in the hospital at some point later on.
Oh, man, I am sorry to start the episode off on such a somber note, but oh my goodness, if you have not been aware of this situation, which, you know, this is pretty crazy, but I had several conversations yesterday with a few different people, actually a couple work-related people, and then one of my neighbor, and then someone else, not Matt Leinert, my neighbor, but a different neighbor. And oh my God, they had not heard about this. So maybe you haven't as well. But in case you haven't, this is like incredibly sad. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I want to talk about a part of this story that's just not getting talked about at all. But again, in case you are not aware, there was a 25-year-old U.S. airman that literally set himself on fire on Monday in front of the Israeli embassy in D.C., and he live streamed this on Twitch. I watched the video. I'm going to play a part of what he talked or what he said as he was walking up. Basically, he walked up, was live streaming, saying what he's saying, and then he set his phone down on the ground, and then basically doused himself in this accelerant and literally set himself on fire. And, I mean, it's insane that he did that. And the reason I want to talk about it a little bit is, honestly, it's very, like, disheartening, the conversations that are being had about it, because none of the conversations are talking about, hey, what got into this kid? And for somebody that did not have a direct connection to Palestine and to Gaza, you know, I could understand if he had served in that area and let's say he had seen a tremendous amount of, you know, death and destruction of the Palestinian civilians, but he did not. He didn't have anything to do with that area. So the question becomes, you know, what is it that made this kid do something so extreme? And, you know, this is someone that is in our U.S. military. And so obviously he must have been dealing with, you know, significant mental health related issues in order to do this. I mean, again, this is not a PTSD type syndrome or anything like that, because again, he's never served in that region for anything. So I tried to look online to see, was there a direct connection there? And there wasn't. And again, what I didn't like is, oh man, you had one side of the media basically trying to paint him out as a deranged lunatic. But again, he's serving in our military at the time. And then there was the other side. And again, this part I didn't like either. The pro-Palestinians who, applauded him for his sacrifice. And I didn't like that either. I really didn't. It's like there were, vigils for him and things done to honor him, which again, I mean, I guess that's nice, but you shouldn't praise the kid for taking his life like that. I feel terrible for his family and for him. I mean, if you look at the pictures, he just looks like a nice kid. He kind of looks like Richie Cunningham from Happy Days, like just a Opie type, good old American redheaded kid. So anyway, the whole thing was incredibly sad. The post coverage, again, on both sides, like we should be talking about, hey, what drove someone in our military to do that when they have no direct connection? And oh, by the way, maybe we need to take inventory of the folks in our military, because this kid could have easily not set himself on fire, but done something that could have harmed, hundreds, thousands of other people, innocent people. I mean, like he could have went into the Israeli embassy and blew himself up in the embassy. That's not helping anything. That's not helping the people in Gaza, for innocent, people inside of the Israeli embassy to lose their lives. So anyway, pretty crazy situation overall. And the reaction on both sides, to me, honestly just doesn't do this kid justice. Not even that it doesn't do him justice. I want to delve into, instead of trying to justify it or appreciate it, let's try and understand it.
And look, it really speaks to the tensions that are continuing to escalate around the war in Gaza, not just across the world, but here in the United States. We saw a similar incident in December when someone self-immolated, lit themselves on fire outside of the Israeli consulate in Atlanta. But this feels different. This is an active duty member of the military burning himself to death on the streets of the nation's capital.
God, I literally didn't know somebody tried to do this in Atlanta back in December. Anyway, it does speak to the fact that, this is a problem. This entire war, I don't even want to call it a war because it's a pretty one-sided war, but this entire situation needs to end. It needs to end. And, some people who claim, it's not as bad as it is. I mean, this thing drove this random U.S. airman to set himself on fire. Like, there's something here that caused him to do that.
I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal.
All right, so that is his voice. That is him basically walking and talking into his phone, and then he pretty much will walk up and set his phone down, and then that's when he sets himself on fire.
Oh, free Palestine! Hey! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Get me a fire extinguisher! Get the fire extinguisher! Jesus Christ! Hey, get the fire extinguisher! I'll cover you, I'll cover you!
They have it right here. It's coming. He said he.
So that was the end of it. You know, obviously, man, those police were on it, though. I guess there are police stationed all around D.C., and I'm assuming at this point, the Israeli embassy's got to be heavily guarded. Anyway, really, really just awful overall situation. I hope that this doesn't turn into, you know, one side turning him into a lunatic and then the other side trying to turn him into a martyr, because neither one of those to me is appropriate. I think instead there needs to be an attempt to try and figure out, and I don't even know how you do this, maybe by talking to his family and loved ones, kind of what was going on in his head that caused him to do this. And then by the same token, how can we prevent this from not only people in our military whom have access to, you know, high-powered weapons and machinery, but how do we not have this happen at all? I mean, this is such a volatile situation. So, you know, who knows what's going to take place with this? You know, there's a lot of talk about a ceasefire finally happening before Ramadan, which is the big Islamic holiday. You know, President Biden, I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but like what's up with this dude and eating ice cream on camera? Like it's pretty ridiculous to me, but he was literally like licking an ice cream cone like a 6-year-old. And the reporters, he was with Seth Meyers from Saturday Night Live, or I think Seth at some point was on Saturday Night Live. But anyway, he was like licking ice cream, and then they were asking him about the ceasefire, and he said, yeah, I think by the end of this weekend, we're going to have that. So, you know, the fact that he was doing it while eating ice cream, I mean, obviously that's just not appropriate. It's just not. Like who are his handlers who allow the media to even ask him questions while he's licking an ice cream cone? That's ridiculous.
It's because of his age that he's been so successful.
76% of voters say they have real concerns about President Biden's ability to serve a second term. Do you think it's responsible for Democrats to put him at the top of the ticket given those concerns?
Responsible. I revere his record.
These voters, though, are not complaining about his record. They're talking about concerns about his ability to beat Trump. Does he need to do more to show?
I think he's doing everything he needs to do. He is leading. And so, no, from my humble perspective, not only the last 3 years have been extraordinary. I've been out with, as you know, on the campaign trail. I was just out in California. I've seen him up close. I've seen him from far.
All right, that was Gavin Newsom, president of the Biden fan club. This guy, man, I'm telling you, I know a lot of people don't like him, but the dude is slick. And he, again, I don't like what he says a lot of times. Like, he just comes off like such a politician in that, but he's a politician. So I guess 5 stars because he's really nailing that role. But this was part of what I had mentioned, the interview he did with NBC over the weekend, where he said 100% Biden should debate Trump. So that was another piece of that he really was advocating, you know, for Biden. But, you know, again, like I said, there's another video of Biden going into a diner with Mayor Karen Bass, which I talked about in the previous episode. And, you know, he looks feeble and he looks frail. And I don't know why anyone would want him to debate Trump. So, you know, this falls into the rhetoric category again with me.
How long can Nikki Haley stay in the race?
As long as there's money. I've been talking to donors over the past 12 hours, and they say they're going to keep pouring money into her campaign and into her super PAC. But at the same time, they know that Super Tuesday, come early March, that's going to be a real crossroads for her. Going past Super Tuesday, going to be very difficult in terms of organization and fundraising. And she has told reporters in recent days that she's not thinking beyond that at this point.
All right, speaking of rhetoric, so that's the latest with Nikki Haley. I will say a big update, and I talked about these guys in a podcast episode way back when, where we talked about super PACs, but then also donations to Nikki Haley. So the Koch brothers, Koch. One of them died, so there's only one. So it's the Koch brother. I think Charles is alive. I don't know which one is alive. But anyway, so they stopped funding. They basically, through their libertarian PAC, they stopped funding Nikki Haley after her loss in South Carolina. So that's a pretty major donor. They had contributed roughly $30 million to her campaign fund. So they came on record and said, we are pulling our support for Nikki Haley. But she still has a ton of other support, and she's absolutely come out in the media. She was on CNN. This is another thing. Again, like, look for strange bedfellows. And a Republican and CNN, or if a Democrat goes on Fox, those are strange bedfellows. Those don't normally happen, and they don't make sense. So then you have to try and, like, I don't know, dissect it a little bit and see what the intent of that is. But she basically went on CNN and said, hey, I'm doing this for the American people. I'm doing this for my kids and your grandkids and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, she's staying in it. You know, it's not her money, so she doesn't care. She's being told what to do for sure. And, you know, who knows? I still think she's viable. I really do. She's not viable from a vote standpoint. She's viable from a Trump gets JFK'd standpoint, something like that.
The Iranian government masks a corrupt dictatorship behind the false guise of a democracy. It has turned a wealthy country with a rich history and culture into an economically depleted rogue state whose chief exports are violence, bloodshed, and chaos. The longest suffering victims of Iran's leaders are, in fact, its own people.
All right, that actually wasn't easy to figure out who that was, but that's Trump, and he's talking about the government in Iran. And the reason I want to play this is because it's going to bring up an interesting point and something I'm trying to see if I can put together a really solid episode and take on, and that is Trump derangement syndrome. You know, like I've talked about before, man, he's just such a lightning rod and just such a, I don't know, you either love the guy or you hate the guy. Well, there is a middle ground. I'm kind of in the middle ground. I don't love him and I don't hate him. But the reason I'm playing this is because you've got a significant amount of people, probably a lot of people that I'm friends with, that hate Trump. But then by the same token, let's say my Persian friends, my Iranian friends, a lot of them hate Trump for sure. But at the same time, Trump's the one that is saying stuff like this.
Rather than use its resources to improve Iranian lives, its oil profits go to fund Hezbollah and other terrorists that kill innocent Muslims and attack their peaceful Arab and Israeli neighbors.
So that was a big statement there too. Arab and Israeli neighbors. So, you know, it's like right now what's happening is, first of all, the Arab population, for the most part, they hated Trump. But now they're being forced to potentially vote for the lesser of two evils. And I will say, from everything I'm seeing online from these big Arab communities like in Michigan and other places, they are leaning towards Trump versus Biden. Think about that. Trump's the one that put the travel ban on, many Arab countries when he first took office. Everybody is terrified that if he takes office again, what he's going to do to Muslims. But then, man, it's like, you've got all that, but because of how Biden has handled this situation in Gaza, as well as the continual support of Israel, that entire Muslim community is kind of being backed in a corner, and they're choosing Trump.
This wealth, which rightly belongs to Iran's people, also goes to shore up Bashar al-Assad's dictatorship, fuel Yemen's civil war, and undermine peace throughout the entire Middle East. We cannot let a murderous regime, continue these destabilizing activities while building dangerous missiles, and we cannot abide by an agreement if it provides cover for the eventual construction of a nuclear program.
Anyway, I wanted to play that entire thing because, again, if you hate Trump, and I'm really asking those that do hate Trump, if you hate him so much, but he's the one really saying what I'm pretty sure you believe when it comes to, you know, the role of Iran and all this, and I'll make this even more, I guess, pointed. All of my Jewish and Israeli friends, whom, again, for the most part, many of them I know hate Trump, but, you know, he's the one advocating. Although, again, man, that one gets even trickier because I don't think him and Netanyahu are on good terms because you don't really hear anything about Trump. But overall, he is definitely the one taking the much harder stance against Iran and then all of these rogue factors that Iran is supposed to support. So, you know, I think people are going to be kind of caught in a little bit of a quandary because it's like, okay, the guy I hate is the one basically saying the things that I want the guy I love to say. So who the heck do I vote for?
Here in the U.S., a chilling new report warning of the potential threat of cyber attacks by China. Tonight, intelligence officials issuing an urgent bulletin saying Chinese hackers have been secretly infiltrating critical American infrastructure for at least the last 5 years. FBI Director Christopher Wray warning China is stepping up its cyber warfare, preparing to target water treatment plants, the electrical grid, oil and natural gas pipelines, and transportation.
That was David Muir, ABC News. So the China thing is alive and kicking. I will say, anyone who has AT&T for their cell service, I don't know if you were affected. Gosh, when was it? I think it was last week, maybe on Friday or Thursday, but there was like a outage with AT&T. I thought that was a little bit weird, although they did give me a $5 credit on my bill. Thank you very much, AT&T, for the $5. But anyway, you know, this is kind of like the stuff we talked about that's on the table to potentially disrupt the election. You know, I thought that story from ABC News was a little bit out of the blue and weird. And again, it got, you know, blasted out to various places and talked about, you know, this has been going on for 5 years. I don't know. That seemed goofy to me. All right, that's it. 23 minutes right now. Man, we covered a few different things. There is another clip from Bernie Sanders that I did want to play. Again, Bernie, I mean, I know a lot of people have been critical about him not, you know, coming to the humanitarian cause of the Palestinians earlier, but the dude is like a one-man wrecking crew against Benjamin Netanyahu right now. He really like takes any and every opportunity to absolutely slam Netanyahu. And so, you know, along with some of the other stuff I'm seeing, I think this situation in Gaza, as we get into March, it's either going to come to an end or it's going to turn into something 5,000 times worse. And maybe that is the quote unquote March 2024 event that turns the world into a tailspin. I don't know. But what I do know is until that happens, and even after that happens, I will be calling a spade a spade.
The ending was terrific.
This episode is being brought to you by the upcoming book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You. That's right, Bro wrote a book, and it's coming soon. Stay tuned.